Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, reviewing an ultra cheap belt grinder for knife makers. Want to get into knife making, but you feel like you need to buy a bunch of super expensive gear? Not so fast. There are ways to get started that don't cost an arm and a leg. So virtually every knife maker uses a belt grinder as one of the core pieces of knife making gear. I mean, maybe the core piece of gear. Today, we're going to see if this grinder right here, the $179 Buck Tool 2x42 grinder, is part of that equation, or if it's just a piece of junk that would waste your time. Hang around to find out all the answers.
If this grinder looks a little bunged up, there's a reason. Normally I review gear that either I buy or that's sent to me new in the box from the manufacturer, but in this case my buddy Jared Baker just handed me this grinder. He just bought a new big pro model and said, hey, why don't you review it? So that's what I'm doing. Knife makers, especially beginners, are always looking for a reasonably priced way to test out the hobby and see if it's for them. The belt grinder is absolutely the central tool of the modern knife maker, and pro models run well into the thousands. So a lot of people are looking at this sort of machine as a budget-friendly alternative. So how does this stack up for the knife maker? Let's start with the facts and figures. This is the Buck Tool BG2600 2x42 combo grinder, meaning it has a belt grinder that runs a 2-inch wide by 42-inch long belt, along with a bench grinder that runs a 6-inch wide grinding wheel. The motor's rated at 3 amps, which has a horsepower equivalent of probably a third to half a horsepower. Single speed, you turn it on, you turn it off. It's got a flat platen, a drive wheel, and a tracking wheel up on top. The Buck Tool comes with 2 grinding tables, one larger and one smaller, more of a tool rest sort of thing. I see zero use for the small one. It's just something that'll clutter up your shop. The table is adjustable to different angles. I found this fiddly and hard to do, but then I don't change the angle on my tables much, so for me at least that's not really a drawback. The only place it's annoying is when you're changing belts. More on that later. So for me, set it and forget it. There's a tracking knob up here that allows you to keep the belt centered. It actually works much better than tracking knobs on a lot of cheap grinders. There are various safety covers which Jared removed long ago. That's what safety covers are for, to take off and throw away. I've known hundreds of knife makers in my life, and I've never yet heard of one getting body parts sucked into the belt. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's low on the list of safety concerns for knife makers, especially for a low-powered model like this. You change belts with this knob here, which detensions the belt, allowing you to change it. Very easy to do with flexible belts, but a bit of a pain in the neck for belts with hard backing, especially ceramic belts. Sneaking past the corner of the table is no picnic. If I were using this all the time, I'm sure I'd figure out a technique that was a little easier, but honestly, I'd be tempted to mod this thing by cutting a little piece off the corner to facilitate belt changes. Which introduces probably the single biggest problem with this grinder. The clearance between the grinding wheel and the frame is insufficient to allow thick belts like 36 grit ceramics, which I basically use every single time I make a knife, to pass through this little gap. I'm not sure, but I think Jared may have done a little grinding to it to improve the clearance, maybe with a Dremel or something. I'm not honestly sure about that, but still, I found that I had to do a little power assist with my hand to get it going because of the friction at that spot when I was using fresh 36 grit belts. That said, I did get it going, and once it starts operating, it's fine. Over time, I'm sure it'll naturally just grind that little clearance so that the belt spins freely. But it's a bit of a rookie mistake on Buck Tool's part.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video or the other knife making videos I've been making for the past 14 years, yep, that's right, please help this channel by supporting us on Patreon. All these cool cameras and lights and stuff cost money, and the time I spend on these videos just doesn't begin to get covered by the tiny amount of money that I get from YouTube. As a way of thanking you for your support, I make plans for most of my builds, including this one, available exclusively to Patreon subscribers. Patreon.com/Walter Sorrells.
Speaking of drawbacks, I put the machine through its paces working on a couple of knives from an electrician friend who helped get my new CNC machine wired up. Video about that coming soon, by the way. But what you'll notice here is that when I put a reasonable amount of pressure on the grinder, it kind of stalls out the motor. Won't hurt anything, but it just means you can't really lean into this grinder and get the full advantage out of this 2-inch wide belt. As I said, I reviewed the Buck Tool 1x42 grinder recently and didn't remember this being as much of a problem. Turns out when I checked, it has a significantly larger motor. Something to think about if you're considering getting one of these two machines. So more on that in a minute.
So one thing I should mention here is that I'm going to be doing a big overview of belt grinders in a month or two. And when I do, I'll leave a link here. If you're thinking about buying a belt grinder and you're just kind of overwhelmed with the big range of choices, I'll get you sorted out. If there's no link here yet, subscribe to the channel and then keep your eyes peeled. I really think this will be one of the most valuable videos that I've ever done for knife makers.
So the overall point I'd say after testing this machine is it works fine. My feeling is that you do well to use a jig when grinding bevels on this table. In fact, for me, I'd probably remove the table altogether. I like grinding freehand, and so that would work fine for me. But everybody's not in that same boat. Also, I found the grooves in the face of the table a bit of a distraction. They have a tendency to kind of channel your blade in ways that you didn't intend. But once you get used to them, that's not really a big deal. You adapt to every machine, and this has got plenty of capacity for basic knife making. You can make a really nice knife on here if you want to. So, let me quickly mention the other Buck Tool belt grinder, the 1x42. It's a little more powerful, but it's also a hair more expensive, and your belts do less work and therefore wear out faster because they're only 1 inch wide. If I were going back to back and trying to decide which one to buy, not really sure which one I'd choose. Probably the 1x42 because of the more powerful motor, but having the 2-inch wide belt is definitely nice. So I think it's a close call either way.
So how does this Buck Tool grinder shake out? Look, we have to start by being honest here. It's a $175 tool. It does not have the grunt, the rigidity, the flexibility of professional 2x72-inch, big boy type grinders. But did you expect it to? I mean, most of the time, the old saw that you get what you pay for is true. And you didn't pay much for this sucker. But look, let's think about who this machine is for. It's a starter machine, meaning that it's for people who are just dipping their toe into knife making. Or, maybe you're thinking, hey, I'd like to make a knife every 3, 4, 5, 6 months, but, it's not something I'm going to be out there in the shop every single weekend doing. In other words, it's not really a permanent solution for somebody who's super serious about knife making. But, like I said, if you just want to dip your toe into the water or you're figuring on making a knife, every 3, 4, 5, 6 months, then buying a Bader or an Ameribraid or a Wirtz or something like that might be overkill depending on what your budget is. So a machine in this class is probably about right for a lot of guys. So key question, how does it stack up against other grinders in this general range? Well, one thing's for sure, it is a huge step up over the $60 1x30 Harbor Freight belt grinder that I reviewed, 6 months ago or so. So, for what you pay, to me, this is a lot of grinder. On the other hand, it is a major step down from, say, an Ameribraid 2x42, which costs a lot more but has a lot more strength and performance. Bottom line, it's a good solid choice for guys who are just trying out the knife making hobby and don't want to throw a ton of money at it. A little underpowered? Yes. A little rickety? Yeah, probably so. Would I have preferred that they had gotten rid of this right here and put in a little bit more powerful motor? Yes, I would have. But still, for what you pay, a lot of value for the money.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.